welcome to 99 zu 1. I am Nadim and I am your host. Today we have an episode in English for you. There's a particular reason why we are doing this in English. We have been producing a series of a critique of postcolonial thought in the world, in which we address various topics regarding postcolonialism, its reasons, its errors, its ideologies, its thinking, its idea about science and its political consequences. And we have been doing this in German, and while doing this in German, we obviously, as this is a very international discussion, realized that we need to make this critique available in English such that we can have this international discussion, maybe send that critique out to some interested folks out there in the world, and then hopefully get into a debate. And this is why we are basically repeating these 5 episodes I think we did until now in German. We're repeating that now in English, and for that we have Michael Kuhn here again. Welcome to 99 zu 1 again, Michael Kuhn.
Welcome. Yes, hello.
Michael, we are going to talk again about postcolonialism. For all the people that have seen the episodes in German, there might be a lot of repetition, but everybody else has now the chance to follow up in English. What we want to achieve with this is to basically kick off a debate around this topic. And in order to do this, maybe it makes sense for you to give us a short introduction on what is this postcolonial debate. There's also the notion of decolonized thinking. What's the content of this? How does one have to understand the notion of postcolonialism?
Okay, yes, thank you. So though you said it already, I want to repeat what you said. We did that in German already, and I would like to encourage everybody who will listen to these videos to send your comments in order to shift this presentation style of event towards a discussion between those who listen to my videos and me, and also among the people who are listening. So please feel invited to send your comments, and we will have, as it looks now, 4 sessions. I will give, as Nadim just said, a short introduction, a short overview over these 4 sessions. And we will have, if I see that correctly, we will have at the end of these, after these 4 sessions, we will also have a video number 5, in which we will have a debate about your comments. So please send us your comments as a basis for having this discussion after the 4 videos. Now, I have to say something else now. This is a video series about postcolonialism. Before saying what this is about, it is obvious that postcolonialism is a very broad debate that covers many aspects. It covers political aspects, historical aspects, and of course, it is a debate among scientists about how they see the world. And this is, of course, the core part of this video series, but it is also obvious presenting a video that discusses postcolonialism. This whole debate is a very challenging, demanding exercise, because this debate, as I said, has so many different political, epistemological, and all sorts of also really only political aspects beyond all the scientific discussions, that it is it's quite demanding to say I make a presentation about this debate. But I want to do this because I think it has certain elements, and my intention is not to dig into all the individual theories in details, but to try to characterize what I think is problematic about this debate, and to start with my conclusions, if you want, What I want to say is this, and this is what I'm going to try to prove in these next videos. Number one is this debate is an opposition against what in this debate is always characterized as the North. So it's an opposition of the South against the North. And my critique of this discussion is that rather than opposing the North, it is accommodating the political construction of these southern societies in the way it is discussed to the very North. So it is achieving the opposite of what it intends to do. The same applies to the sciences. This is a debate that opposes the northern sciences. I will go into details of these discussions in my one of the next videos. My hypothesis is that the result is that this debate is a way, ironically, which contributes to the universalization of the very sciences they oppose, thanks to the way they oppose, or as I would say, do not really oppose it, but make a kind of imitation, a variation of these very theories. This is what I have to prove, but this is what I will try to prove. So now let me give you an overview over these presentations I will make. Altogether, as far as I can see, as I said, pointing on the number 5 with a debate about the previous videos, there will be 4 videos, and I will just give you an overview over these 4 videos. Video number 1 will start with an introduction. This is the introduction Nadim just asked me to start with. I will do it right away. In this introduction, I will outline a little bit the historical background of what this post-colonial is all about. It is a debate after, obviously, that's how this discussion is therefore coined, after colonialism, and what happened before and how it came to this post-colonialism, and what this post-colonialism is positively, not only what is after colonialism, but what is it then? That's what I will discuss a little bit in my introduction in the video number 1. And then also in the video number 1, I want to discuss a second point, which talks about what this debate substantially is about, what it originates from. And this will be about, some reflections about the nature of these society systems, or these societies that have been created under the notion of post-colonialism. So what are these societies about? What are they like? And what has this to do with the debate that originates, to my mind, from these characteristics of these new societies, and of course, not to forget, from the relation between these so-called new independent states and their societies, the relations between these new independent states and these societies to the North, or if you want, and this is a category that this debate also is using, to the imperialist world. So that's what I want to think about, to share my thought about with you in this video number 1. Frankly, we tried to do the same thing in the last series with the German videos. We always didn't manage to keep our schedule, but we will see. I'll try my best. So that's video number 1. Number 2 then discusses what I call my headline here is that's the section number 3. That's where the video number 2 starts. That is, I call masterminds of post-colonial thinking. And in this next video, then I will discuss all the leading heads reflecting about post-colonialism, considering themselves as the masterminds of post-colonial thinking. That is are people like Edward Zeit, Andre Mosavi, Spivak, Homi Bhabha, Chakrabarti, Sanjay Seth, and all these famous people who make different contributions to this debate of colonialism, which has also different sections. I will talk about that. That's about indigenization. It's about the epistemological dimension of post-colonial thinking, and it is a lot about what post-colonial thinking anyway is very much focusing on. That is this idea of a national identity, and it is about also about how to position this national identity of these new independent states in front of the existing imperial world. What these theories are saying about this is what I will discuss then in the second video. That's the masterminds, if you want, of post-colonial thinking. Then I will talk about something else in the video number 3. And in video number 3, after discussing the masterminds of post-colonial thinking, I will say something of course, provocative, and say and argue that the masterminds of post-colonial thinking are creatures, theoretical creatures, of the masterminds of the northern theories they criticize. So what I will try to prove is to say that what these so-called southern theories, the post-colonial thinkers, what they are creating is the result, is the outcome of theories which have been created by the very northern social sciences. I'm referring here to people like Foucault, Bourdieu, Thomas Kuhn, Wallerstein, and such kind of people. There are much more than that. I don't want to mention them all. I cannot discuss them all. But these are people along which I can demonstrate how the masterminds of post-colonial thinking are somehow people who learned their lectures from the masterminds of that very northern, or if you want, from that European social sciences. In this section, I will also discuss, of course, that is also inevitable, what the contribution of the historical materialism was to this debate. This is inevitable because, as I will say soon in my introduction, this all these people I just mentioned, all these masterminds of post-colonial thinking, they're all former Marxists. They're all former critiques of capitalism. So I want to discuss how did it work that these theorists were all Marxists and are now criticizing Marx, but consider their critique as a further development of the critique of capitalism. That's quite tricky thing, but that is something I also want to do. Then the video number 4 will reflect about what I call the scientific consequences. What does it mean for the world of sciences? If and how this debate intervenes, and it, of course, has a massive influence on how the world of sciences works, thanks to this intervention of post-colonial thinking. And I will finish the video number 4, and that is the last video. I will finish then my reflection in the video number 4 with some reflections about what I call the political consequences. And I made a bit kind of unusual thing for this video series, because I'm always confronted with the question when I have discussions with people from these southern theories, from all these people from Southern America, Africa, and so on, and of course also India, and so on and so on. Because I'm always confronted with the question, Michael, you are criticizing here capitalism. What is your alternative? Can you finally tell us what else you think one could do than capitalism? And this question is rightly raised because these people always argue and say, hey, but you know, we had this Soviet Union, it was an anti-capitalistic system, and as people phrase it, it collapsed. I will also say something about this notion of collapsing. But we had it, so, and it failed. So then what else can we do alternatively to this world of capitalism? And I decided I will try not to sort of reject that question, though there are good reasons also to do it, because it obviously means that you didn't share my critique, and then we have to discuss it again. But I will do it and answer that question, because if I answer this question, it allows me to make a summary of my critique that I have done throughout the whole 4 videos before. So that's my overview over the first 4 videos, and I would now start with the, if you want, with the video number 1, which is the introduction into this debate, with an overview over what happened before this notion of post-colonialism appeared, which means what happened between colonialism and post-colonialism, and then discuss in the second point the particular situation of these new nation-state constructed societies in the former colonial world. That's what I'm going to do now and start with. That was actually what Nadim asked me to do. Sorry, that little detour, it was just
It's okay.
To give you an overview.
Yeah, all good. Then, I mean, that's maybe the, maybe I start again and ask the notion of post-colonialism, which talks about something that happened after colonialism that still is worthy of critique. This is something that is brought up here. And so it would be interesting to maybe first put this into context and try to understand, okay, what is the baseline that these people start from, the base assumptions, what actually is the world in reality, is the world after colonialism, let's say, that these people are then addressing and answering to.
Yes. It is already worth noticing that this debate is called postcolonialism. And why do I say that? Is my video working? I look a little bit dead now. Can you hear me still?
Yes, yes, we
okay.
hear you, but your video is stuck for a moment. But I think
that doesn't matter.
It might get back any second. So
yeah,
just
yeah,
keep
that
going.
doesn't matter so much. So what I want to say is the notion is somehow, in a certain sense, negative, not as a value judgment, but it is negative in the sense that it says this is what comes after colonialism. But something you say comes after that does not say, and what is it? You somehow don't say that if you say it's post-colonialism. And my hypothesis is there is a good reason for that. The reason for that is that, in fact, what happens under this negative notion after colonialism is something that, in fact, doesn't go together at all with what the leading political forces in these colonized countries were really aiming at. They were aiming at societies which were not serving capitalism, which were not part of the capitalism, because for all the anti-colonialist political activists, as for the people who were creating theories about the world at that time, it was obvious and clear that colonialism is a way of exploiting these parts of the world for the sake of capitalism. Colonialism was a variation of a particular way of exploiting these parts of the world for the capitalist societies in what is today called the North. So The reason why this is called post-colonialism is that it somehow, interestingly, denies what it positively is. Again, positively is not a value judgment. It just means what is it then? And what it is in fact that these former societies, colonized societies, in which the political activists, the political movements were fighting against capitalism, these societies have been transformed in the era after colonialism, in the post-colonialism, towards capitalist societies. This is remarkable because it raises a couple of questions I will come to soon. It is remarkable, again, because according to the discussion under post-colonialism, the aim to become independent states has been positively achieved, though this aim is also critically reflected by post-colonial debates. But what doesn't appear in that notion is the notion of capitalism anymore. It doesn't reveal the positive characteristics of the society system that has been achieved thanks to the abolishment of colonialism. Colonialism has been abolished, true. But it has been abolished by replacing colonialism through the adjustment or subordination of the former colonized societies under capitalism. This raises a couple of questions I will come to later. Another very important point for the reflections about post-colonialism, which doesn't want to reveal this in its notion of post-colonialism, this negative notion. Another aspect of this historical development from colonialism to post-colonialism is this. As I already said, the thinkers in the former colonized world, the political activists, they were basically all critiques of capitalism. They were all Marxists. Needless to say, they were Marxists as it has been interpreted, discussed, taught, thought around the world by the leading theoretical forces which interpreted Marxism at those times. That was the so-called historical materialism, the interpretations of Marx, the interpretation of a critique of capitalism as it has been elaborated, presented, and exported around the world by the thinkers, leading thinkers of the Soviet Union. Of course, needless to say, right, it is not that the people learned their theory of anti-capitalism not by Marx. Of course, they also read it by Marx, but as everybody knows, there are interpretations of what Marx said, and the interpretations that were somehow circulated and shared by all the thinkers were these Marxists, as it was being reflected or interpreted by the thinkers of the Soviet Union. So we have another remarkable observation to make here. The progress, the historical progress that has been made, abolishing colonialism, ended, colonialism was replaced by the integration of the colonial world, as I said, into the society system of capitalism. And this is the opposite of what all these thinkers in this part of the world always were advocating, promoting, and were fighting for. So this raises another question. What is the development of theorizing under this notion of post-colonialism, which represents, in fact, all the critical thinkers after colonialism, the critical thinkers until today, those people who are sort of dominating the critical debate about the post-colonial world? What does it mean if all these thinkers have been critiques of capitalism, and that their successful fight ended up in the transformation of their societies in a variation of capitalism? All these countries, as I said before, have become nation-state constructed societies with market economies, and these type of societies, the capitalism that before performed its relation to these parts of the world as colonialism, that very societies practice. So what happens to these thinkers, to the critical thinkers, to the critiques of capitalism, which are now somehow coining and carrying out their debates under this notion of post-colonialism? What is that debate then about? There is another thing that one needs to somehow dig out here, because it is some time ago. Some people might not be aware about it. It is worth to mention, and this is maybe at least as important as what I said before about this negative notion doesn't reveal what it positively is, capitalist societies participating in the capitalist world. There is another thing that happened in the beginning of the 90s, I think 1991. Until that time, the world was and is no longer divided into, in fact, opposing society systems, into capitalism and into another alternative society system, into an anti-capitalist society model practiced by nobody else but the Soviet Union. And I say nobody else but the Soviet Union means that it was not any kind of exotic little, Cuba, or any kind of minor little country which nobody cared about. It was one of the biggest, I think it's actually the biggest country of the world. But I don't want to argue about this, what is big? Is it the size, the number of inhabitants? It's a major big country of the world, the Soviet Union, which practiced an alternative anti-capitalistic society system until the 90s. And it was actually this historical fact that there was an alternative, powerful country, the Soviet Union, in this world, that allowed all these thinkers and political activists in the colonized world to carry out their opposition against colonialism as an opposition against that society system that practiced colonialism. They are anti-capitalism. Otherwise, they had no chance to do that. That was the reason why there was this massive political movement against capitalism in the colonized world, and the fight against colonialism could be really carried out as a fight against capitalism, because it was supported by this powerful country, the Soviet Union. As you all know, there is this notion discussed in the Western world, but interestingly also discussed among these post-colonial thinkers, that this alternative opposing society system, this anti-capitalist society system of the Soviet Union, that this society system collapsed. Now, I don't want to start a discussion about the history of the Soviet Union. Don't worry, that's certainly not what one can do in this video series. But I just want to point on the idea why this is called collapsed. This collapse wants to say that society system didn't function anymore. And if you look at the arguments why this society system, according to this theory, why it ended collapsed, was it didn't work successfully compared to what a capitalist society would have practiced. The reason, in other words, why this notion of collapse occurred was to say, because the Soviet Union didn't practice capitalism, it collapsed. And because it didn't practice capitalism, it didn't work. This is an important message because it wants to say that the only society system that really works is capitalism. It is a way to naturalize the concept of capitalism as the only society system that succeeds to exist. And this is remarkable. Again, I don't want to go too much into details here. This is remarkable because it was, in fact, the theory of the historical materialism, the theory of the Soviet Union, which was the one that created this notion of collapse. It was the interpretation of Marx, I will come back to that as well, it was the interpretation of Marx of the Soviet Union that it would be capitalism which would collapse due to its contradictions. That was basically how it was phrased. Capitalism has no chance to survive. It will die due to its own antagonistic contradictions. It will disappear by itself because it is not able to survive. It will collapse due to its social contradictions between rich and poor and all these kind of things. That is the theory of the theory of the Soviet Union. I will come to that theory later when I talk about the influence of Marxism in that post-colonial theory. And coining the disappearance, the end, let's put it that way, the end of the Soviet Union as a collapse is a little bit a kind of revenge, theoretical revenge against the theory of Marxism, which was somehow saying that capitalism would collapse. And then the notion of the Soviet Union that collapsed was a little bit a kind of revenge, theoretical revenge, saying, you see what collapsed? It was the Soviet Union. It was the alternative society system to capitalism that collapsed. Just one sentence. As you might remember, the reason why the Soviet Union ended, no collapse, a decision of the, what is it, the Central Committee, or how do you call that, of the Communist Party, who found out that they didn't know anymore why to practice an alternative society. The way they had a society system was so close to capitalism that they forgot. They didn't know anymore what the difference was. But that's my hypothesis. This is something one has to discuss and think about when one discusses the end of the Soviet Union. By the way, it is remarkable for all the sort of Marxist discussion, all the anti-capitalist discussions around the world, both in the former colonized world, among these thinkers there, but also among all the Marxists, the anti-capitalist thinkers in the West. It is remarkable that in the Western world, after the so-called collapse of the Soviet Union, the anti-capitalist critique widely disappeared from one day to another one. I remember when I went to France, especially to France and Italy, I must also say, but especially to France in the 70s or 80s, and if you went to a cafe, you were surrounded by people who didn't discuss anything than any kind of anti-capitalist theories. You found people sitting around a cafe and drinking any Campari or no, Campari is Italy. Sorry, my God, how could I drink any drink? I have just a Cointreau or whatever they drink, and they had the red flag on the table in all kind of cafes all the time. That disappeared from one day to another, as if the so-called collapse of the Soviet Union was the proof of the collapse of critiquing capitalism. And it was the collapse. It really ended. It did not end. That's the difference. And that's remarkable here. It did not end. The critique of capitalism did not end in among the thinkers in the former colonized world, among those who are practicing that post-colonialism. They have a critique about Marx, but they consider this critique as a further development of the critique of capitalism. And to find out what that means and how that works is another sort of a relevant topic of what I want to discuss when I discuss post-colonial theories. So again, unlike let's call them the Western intellectuals, who were massively critiques of capitalism, and where this critique more or less within a couple of years after the 90s, I would say it didn't take more than 5 years, and you could go to France, there are no red flags on the tables anymore. It has all gone, and you could actually, if you look especially at the debate in France, you can see how much the critique of Marx theory of anti-capitalism occurred, and the domination of thinkers especially in France, but not only in France, of course, also in Germany, also in the UK, also in Italy, was a critique of the critique of capitalism. This did not happen in that way, at least, in the debates coined post-colonialism, and trying to find out, to look at how do these debates consider their contributions to thought about the world as a further development of the critique of capitalism, though they also critique Marx. This is a topic that has to be somehow, that is an important issue if you talk about post-colonialism. How do they consider their critique of capitalism? Their critique, how do they consider their debate under the notion of post-colonialism? How do they consider this as a continuation, as a further development of a critique of capitalism? So, there is still one point I need to mention, and this is the question. In fact, what happened, how did it happen that the transformation, the change, the shift of colonialism, of the way to exploit these parts of the world by colonialists, how did it happen that their fight against the capitalist societies succeeded in a certain sense, in the sense that they became independent states, but they became society systems accommodated to the society system of the capitalists of the imperial world. How did that happen? That is the one thing one should also bear in mind, one should also memorize. And I don't want to go into the, again, I don't want to go deeper into the history, but of course one has to answer that question. What happened? What happened that they succeeded becoming independent states, but they didn't become alternative society systems, but they became part of the capitalist world, the world ruled by capitalism. In a bit different way, but they become part of the world ruled by capitalism. The answer here is only, again, a historical hint. My title for that is The Vietnam War. The Vietnam War, I again also don't want to elaborate on this point too much. The Vietnam War is widely discussed as a war that was lost by the United States, and the winners were the Viet Cong, those people who were fighting for an independent Vietnam. I think this is another historical myth. Because if you say the United States lost the war, you have to can only say that if you imply an aim of that war, and that aim of that war, to my mind, that interprets the end of that war as a loss of that war by the United States, implies an aim of the war. I just want to briefly say that didn't exist. My hypothesis is this: Vietnam was the case in which the United States, the leading country of the capitalist world, set an example for all the countries who were combining their fight for independence with a fight for establishing an anti-capitalist society system, supported by the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union disappeared, but the Soviet Union only disappeared in the 90s. The Vietnam War was the way the leading country of the capitalist world gave those fighters for anti-colonialism, aiming at anti-capitalist societies, a lecture. And the lecture was very simple and clear. Fighting for society systems, societies which will be ruled by an independent state and which will oppose our concept of running societies, will oppose capitalism. Doing that, aiming at that, will end up in the death of any societies. That is what the United States did. They taught the social movements in the colonized world, they taught them a lecture, and the lecture was, you can become independent countries, you are welcome. But you only do that if you accommodate your society system under the rule of your state, if you accommodate your society system to the market economies, the rationale, the leading aim of the capitalist world, and if you make your contribution to the world of capitalism. This is what explains why and how it in fact happened that these countries aiming at independency, at an independent state, and aiming at anti-capitalist society system ended with an independent state, but not with an alternative anti-capitalist society system, but with independent states promoted by the United States, with their integration into the market economy, into capitalism of the Western world. For the United States, one should not forget, this also meant that they succeeded with their example they stated in that war in Vietnam, which was, not to forget, before a French colony. And with that war, they stated another thing, that from their point of view of the United States, the country that was the World War II winner, that was the top number one imperial country in the world, they succeeded by doing that also to overcome the exclusive grip of the colonizers, in this case of France, on their colonies, and opened these countries to the whole world of capitalism. And also, of course, via this, open these countries to the interests, to the economic and political interests of the United States. So this has to be kept in mind as just a reminder how it at all happened that the anti-colonial movement in the colonized world was aiming at a twofold aim, becoming a state independent from the colonialists, and doing this by establishing a society system that was no longer serving the societies of the colonialist capitalism. They got, after being given the lecture of the war in Vietnam, telling them, independent states, no problem, you can become, but only under the condition that you abolish your political aim of opposing capitalism. This is what happens, and this is why it happened in that way, that this world was transformed into what it is now, post-colonialism, in which a notion in which capitalism no longer appears. And maybe this is the reason why it no longer appears, because it was taken now for granted, thanks to this lecture given by the Vietnam War, by the bombing of the people in Vietnam. I don't have to tell all the details, you know, about these napalm bombings that was just killing people there. By the way, in brackets, no, I don't want to talk about this genocide. It was not a genocide, of course. This explains how this happens, that the countries succeeded to become, to free these people from the status of being colonized and becoming an independent country, but without achieving their aim to become an alternative society system, not integrated in the market economy of the capitalist world. This has massive consequences, and My hypothesis is, and this is the next point I want to come to, this is therefore the basis, the ground for how these societies then have been constructed. And this basis, I will come to this point now, this basis, how these societies have been constructed as independent nation states, integrated in the world of capitalism, what this means for this particular type of nation states, their societies, and how this is then related to the debate post-colonialism was carrying out as a continuation of the critique of capitalism, at least interpreted as a continuation of a critique of capitalism, more precisely as a debate of a critique of imperialism. It is a bit tricky, but that is the tricky debate post-colonialism is about, and this is the tricky thing one has to try to understand, to analyze, in order to understand this debate coined post-colonialism. So this is what I come to in my following point.
Right. So this was like a quite a long introduction, but now we actually come to that post-colonial debate, and now the question. We haven't talked about that yet, exactly. And now let's talk a little bit about what that debate is, and I mean, it's still kind of an introductory episode, so we will only scratch the surface. But basically, maybe you can talk a little bit about how that debate started, actually, with which kind of ideas it presented itself, and what kind of ideas were discussed and debated there.
Yeah, yes. I'm sorry, Nadim, that this introduction is so damned long. But I think in order to avoid that one, and this happens quite often according to my experiences, that especially within the so-called Western world, the debate about post-colonialism is somehow put aside and said, okay, you have your own theories if you want, and please do that, and so on. And there are not really reflections about what this post-colonialism is. Either you join it and say yes, okay, or that you just say, okay, if you want, do your own theories. We don't care. It's up to you if you want. And what I'm trying to do, and why I made this damned long introduction, was to say, I think you can really only understand why this debate under the notion of colonialism is a little bit more complicated to understand than just saying, okay, it's just another theory. If you know the political background in front of which and what this debate is really about. And this debate is, to put it that way, what also happens quite often, this debate is a lot discussing issues like national identities. It is somehow rediscovering concepts like and all that kind of thing. Debate that very very implications, things which don't very much dealing entities, in other words, with nationalisms. And the point I want to make here is that if one rejects, especially from the point of view of a left, if one rejects this critique, says, well, they're all nationalists, these guys. They're about a representation of their nation states in the world. So it's all a very nationalistically inspired debate. You don't get this discussion at all. You must understand that the debate about post-colonialism is a creature of former Marxist people, and that these people consider, as I said, their debate as a further development of a critique of capitalism. And if you don't somehow put these debates into the context of the political background on which these debates are reflecting, you don't get them, and you somehow misunderstand easily these discussions as a variation of what we know in the West and what we're just discussing, as you know, in Germany heavily, all variation of nationalistic thinking. It is really, there is nationalism in that, but these people are by no means nationalists. So that's why I'm sorry, you have to get a little bit overview over the historical background where this debate comes from, in order to understand what is at all the problem they are talking about. Now, this is not the end of my introduction. Actually, my real introduction starts now. What I was just saying, what I was just saying so far was, I was just sketching the historical development, what happened historically in the shift from colonization towards independent states, and was just pointing on a couple of interesting characteristics, some contradictions between the aims and what has been achieved. And this has also been totally forgotten today, also among those people who discuss this post-colonialism, that it was the development of an anti-capitalist critique and political movement against capitalism towards the integration of these countries into the capitalist world. And the notion of post-colonialism, as one can see, obviously, is, I don't want to say avoiding this, but it's not saying that. It's called after colonialism. But what I try to point out is, what is after colonialism is the integration of this part of the world into capitalism. Why is this important? Because I think it is exactly this, the characteristics of the particular way how these societies, how the political bodies, the nation states of these countries have been made part of that society system that was the one that carried out colonialism. That is bizarre, but that is the reality. What happened was the exploitation of these societies for the exclusive use of the colonialists has been replaced by the generalization of the exploitation of these societies, no longer for an exclusive colonial country, let's say for the UK, Belgium, Netherlands, France, Portugal, but for the capitalist world as a whole. I'm saying that because only this allows to understand also how this debate has been developed. What am I talking about? The major notion under which post-colonial thinking is very well known and spread all around the world is the critique of Eurocentrism. Eurocentrism is somehow a symbol for post-colonial critique. And this notion of Eurocentrism has been created by an Egyptian guy named Zeit. Certainly everybody knows him. Edward, I think is his first name. No,
Edward Said, and he's a Palestinian. Actually, he's not.
He's a Palestinian. Correct. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I didn't know that. But his nationality is
he grew up. No? He grew up in Egypt. Yes, after being displaced with his family. Yeah.
So why do I mention this? Why do I mention Edward Said and his concept of Eurocentrism? I mention this for the following reason. It is that, from my point of view, a very appropriate, insightful introduction into the debate under the notion of postcolonialism. Why is this so important? Edward Said was the one who created this notion of Eurocentrism. The notion of Eurocentrism today is basically is a bit a blah blah word in that context. I can also say this is a bit of a polite way of English phrasing. Not basically, it is discussed as a critique of social science thought. It is a critique of the European sciences, Eurocentrism. But I would like to remind us that the creation of the notion of Eurocentrism originally created by Edward Said was not a critique of the sciences. It was not to say your view is Eurocentric. It was a critique of the integration of the societies of the colonized world into capitalism. It was a bit, I must admit, it was a bit a strange way. Strange, because it was in fact coined by him. He was the one who created this notion, Eurocentrism, because he didn't call it, let's not introduce the system of capitalism, but that is what he in fact meant when he used the term Eurocentrism. What he wanted to say is we should not make the mistake to adjust our society systems to capitalism, to the society systems the Europeans, the former colonizers, practice. So this was how this whole debate about post-colonialism somehow started, as a political critique of people whom he wanted to warn to not use the independency of the states as a means to introduce capitalism into the colonized world. This is remarkable because Said's idea already was affected by the very mistake that this discussion shares fundamentally until today, and which, to my mind, is the basis for all their problematic, let's say it, theories, because it welcomes the independency of the state and says at the same time, but please no capitalism. And the problem of this distinction is that not only Said, but with this notion that founded post-colonial thinking, he created the idea that a nation state could be used also for other society systems. As if a nation state and the way it is constructed was a kind of open political box into which any kind of social, society, economic system could be could be done. And this is a dramatic era. This is the dramatic era that founded, to my mind, the debate of postcolonialism. I want to explain this. As one knows from the debate about postcolonialism, the debate introduced with this notion by Zeit, then carried out basically as a discussion about the creation of the political identities of the citizens of these new societies, these new nation-state constructed societies. The political identity of the members of the former colonized world, now members of a nation-state constructed society. That is what this debate is basically all about the creation of a political identity, and about, secondly, about the relation between this newly created political identity of the new nation states in relation to the political identity of the existing citizenships, the plural is correct, of the colonizers of the imperial world. How they are seen, these citizens, the citizenship, the nationalities, how they are seen by the citizenship of the imperial world. Again, the creation of a national identity and the position this national identity has in the world now consisting of nation states with capitalist societies. Especially after the end of the Soviet Union, all countries around the world were capitalist countries with nation states. And the post-colonial debate is about this, how to create a national identity and how to position this national identity in relation to the existing national identities of the existing capitalist world. That is what I'm saying is this debate about. So the post-colonial discussion, the post-colonial reflections is a response, a way of dealing with the creation of nation states in this part of the world. And it is in particular, therefore, about the question about the relation between the citizens of these countries, of these new countries, of these new nation state-based countries, and their nation state. That is what it's all about. It has, therefore, these basically two sections. Section number one is the creation of a national identity, and section number two is the status of this citizenship of this national identity in relation to the existing national identities of the citizenship in that imperial part of the world. Now, to understand this, why this is a challenge for these countries and what the challenge is, and how this is then the source of the debate about post-colonialism, as I will show when I discuss the post-colonial theories, how this is the base. I want to try to show and to prove via discussing a little bit a kind of how you say excursion? Was this ein Exkurs of English? Excursion, right? So excurse, I think. I don't know. Let's create that word.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter.
good question. I'll figure it out.
Yes, I have to say something about this relation, the relation between nation states and national identity. So this is my second point for today. How
It's a
is that
digression.
constructed?
It's a digression. That's what it is.
Digression. Okay, so I digress. Okay, I make a digression. I made a digression
exactly.
already. I made a digression already towards the history of postcolonialism. I make another digression in order to understand the problem they are dealing with, the problem of creating a national identity and arguing for the position this national identity has in the world of nation states and worldwide citizenships. Why is this the problem? Briefly, in the existing ruling capitalist societies, the national identity, the relationship between the citizens and their ruling political body, the nation state, is constructed, to say it very briefly, in the following way. The elements are this. Firstly, the nation states are a political body which is characterized by basically two things. Again, I have to say that because these countries, the former colonized, have become nation states. And I want to say what this means. It means that they have fundamentally the same essential elements of what constitutes a nation state and a nation state-based society. The element number one is nation states are political bodies in which these political bodies have two things. Number one is, basically it's the same. Number one is they, the nation states, these political bodies, have a monopole on decision making, not which kind of toothpaste you take if you brush your teeth in the morning, and also not if you prefer orange juice or tomato juice, but everything that implies your social life, the social relations of these people in these societies, the social relations and the relations of these people to their political body. About all this, the political body has a decision monopoly. It is the political body who decides what the rationale of this society is, what people have to do as a society as a whole, what their agenda is, what their rationale is. And as everybody knows, if you look at the societies in which we live, in these Western societies, this means that the political body makes decisions about absolutely everything that is related to your social life. It starts with defining what, when you, how do you say, when you are born, this starts to define what it means that you have parents. It defines to start to say what it means when you are a child. It defines what you learn and when you learn and how you learn. It defines how you create your income, how you survive, how you exist. It decides about all kind of social relations. It decides about the relation, as I said, to your parents. It decides about all your relation to people who are therefore called relatives, and so on and on. The way this is decided can be seen in the laws these societies create, in which this political body decides about everything, again, that has something to do with the social relations between you and other members of that society, and the relation between you to this political power. To phrase it the other way around, the society members, regarding the social relations, the society, they have to decide nothing. Nothing that is relevant for the relations between the citizens is decided by any citizen. Nothing. This is the decision monopoly of the political power. Second, not only does this political power constituting these political bodies called nation states, not only do they have the decision power over what this society as a whole, as a society in other words, does, and also what it does not. Not only does it have this decision monopoly defining for the society what the society is all about, what its rationale is, how to do that, and so on and on. It also has a power monopoly. It has the monopoly on imposing its decision with the means of violence against the members of the society. It entitles itself to force all the society members to follow the decisions this political body makes. Maybe I should say just one thing, because since this is the political body and these are the two constitutive elements, these political bodies somehow make what they are. And since these political bodies are, since at least the 90s, since the disappearance of the Soviet Union, in which in fact there were different elements of deciding what the society does, then you find in these, let's call them capitalist nation states, since these nation states are now spread all over the world exclusively as the only political bodies that exist, one should realize that this way of constructing a joint will, if you want, of the society as a will that is imposed on them via a power monopoly. Though this is the way the societies are all structured and organized around the world, it is by no means a very natural way of organizing society. If I may say it as a question, what is the reason why these societies are constructed in the way that their common will, that their joint will, is not created by them, but is created by a political body that is their political body, but that exists as a political power in front of them, forcing them to do what this political power wants. That calls for an explanation. And the explanation is this one. The explanation is the rationale, the aims, the objectives this society and its members have to achieve is not allowing these society members to create a joint will. What is it? It is, everybody knows that, it is the subordination of everything that these society members do under the rationale of producing the growth of wealth measured in money. And I don't want to go here into details, but one thing is obvious already from the way the political body is constructed. What is obvious is that this way of constructing a society is telling about what the rationale of the society is about. The rationale of achieving, by all the contribution from all the members of society, making a contribution to the growth of wealth, of abstract wealth, or in other words, of wealth measured in money. This is obviously a political aim that cannot be made a joint, a shared aim by all the society members. It cannot be made a shared aim because obviously this aim imposes on the society members such kind of conflicting interest into the societies that the only way to run such a society is to run such a society aiming at this rationale, contributing to the growth of money wealth, that such a society can only be run by a political body that enforces this agenda on them. However, the way in which this is imposed to the society members in these capitalist countries I'm talking about, the capitalist countries which were once the colonizers, this is introduced, imposed in a way that in these societies, the society members are made a kind of offer. And the offer is this: you may pursue your individual life agendas however you like, given that you do this under one condition. You do this according to the rules we are setting for you with our decision and power monopole. So the offer that is made to these society members is this: you can have your life vision, whatever it is. You can have a life vision as becoming an architect, as becoming a painter, as becoming a worker, as becoming this or that. And with this life perspective, you can say, I want to at least go 3 times per year to Mallorca and drop from the balcony there, whatever. You can do whatever you like. This is what these societies, in fact, offer their members. You can pursue your life, individual life agendas, aiming at whatever you like, participating in the wealth that this society produces, the money wealth that produces, under one condition. The only way you can do it is that you do it via money that you earn from serving this project of making the wealth measured in money grow. If you do that, you have all the perspectives to achieve life aims which are achievable within and based within this rationale, and based on this rationale, and serving this rationale. So, though there is, as I said, this strange contradiction between the political power having the decision monopole and having the power monopole to impose this rationale on the society members, the society members can accommodate themselves to this rationale and make a kind of, to use a famous new word, a deal. Okay, I follow you, I follow your rules, calculating that following these rules allows me to pursue my life agenda. Based on this, I construct my agreement, my identity with a political body that is imposing the life living conditions on me. But on the other hand, if I follow these imposed rules, I can achieve certain life aims. This is the basis why in such countries people identify themselves with their nation state, though this nation state is forcing them to do what they decide what the citizens have to do. It is this deal I call conceded materialism that makes these societies work, that creates the relation between the political body that has a decision monopole over the people and that has a power monopole to force people to do what they decide what they want them to do. But this is the basis how these nation states construct what post-colonial theories would call a political identity, what others call nationalism. The agreement between the nation state, the political body, and these societies. This is how they work. It is, if you want, the political mistake that people who are entirely dependent and dependent on their political body and forced by the political bodies to serve their life for this agenda the nation state imposes on them, it is the mistake that they interpret, based on the conceded materialism, their nation state as an opportunity for their life agendas. The truth is, it is the other way around, but that is how they interpret, and this is their mistake. This is the mistake to create nationalism. But it has this, if you want, economic political basis. It is this deal. Finished. New nation states. After having said this, I can be short. In these new countries, there are nation states. They have the same characteristics as any nation state, almost. There are nation states which have the decision monopole over what happens in these societies, and they have the same power monopole to impose what they exclusively decide to the members of their societies. There is one thing that does not exist in these societies, and that is what constitutes the basis of what I described as the deal. That is, there is not that thing of what I called a conceded materialism. Why is that the case? And what does it mean? It means the nation state, the political power, cannot trust its society members that they accept the offer to pursue their individual life aims by following the rules of creating money wealth, the growth of money wealth. They cannot make that offer because these countries do not have the economic basis to make such offers. They do not have that kind of economy. They do not have that economic basis. They do not have the production of the wealth in which they could allow people to participate with this conceded materialism. It doesn't exist in these countries. Why does it not exist? It does not exist because in these countries there is a market economy. That is the case. In these countries, as everywhere else, any individual life aim can also only be pursued via owning, and in order to own, earning money. There is no owning because there is no earning. And there is no earning because these societies do not have this national economy that is the production of this wealth, in which they could allow the producers of the wealth to partly participate in it, because it doesn't exist. And it doesn't exist, everybody knows that, because these economies are, in a formal sense, also market economies, but they are market economies without the production of the very wealth the market economy is based on and is all about. These economies are made in order to export the goods which exist in these countries towards the countries of the imperial world for the production of the wealth in these parts of the world. The wealth of these countries is exported and not produced in these countries for the production of the national wealth. It is exported into the imperial world for the production of the wealth in their economies. And this has another implication. The functionalization of these countries as producers of the basic elements of the production of economic wealth exported into the economies of the imperial world implies that these countries are reconstructed for that purpose, delivering goods to the imperial world. And this means, for example, that the traditional way of producing the needs for life that people need in these countries to exist, the traditional ways of creating any goods in these countries, these traditional ways are destroyed. The agriculture, for example, the agricultural basis, the agricultural traditional basis of creating things to eat, to survive, to exist in these countries is reorganized, which is a very nice word. I could also say, that's more precise, is destroyed for the sake of creating these products to be exported, to be sold to the countries which produce the wealth. So that means, I got your message. I got your message. Where we can finalize in a couple of minutes, in fact, yes. So that means, just a little additional economic remark, right? So if these countries can only sell their goods to the imperial world, you can imagine how they can handle the negotiations about the prices if you cannot do anything else but selling things to these countries. You don't have very much power to say something about the price. The price is of course made by the other side. So that means something about the way they participate in this wealth, in this kind of economy. Yeah, so it's all not only produced for these, but also the prices are somehow dictated by these by the buyer. All this, I have only 5 minutes. All this, I don't need so much. All this means these countries have this political body, but they cannot offer their people the deal based on which the citizens of these countries could come to the conclusion that at least their political body is providing them the basis for performing a life as a servant of the economic of the growth of money. Not even that is something that is possible in these states, because that wealth does not exist in these states. So these states have a relation between citizens without this, what I call a conceded materialism. They have to create a national identity that cannot be based on this deal. This is where post-colonial thinking starts. How to create a national identity without an economic basis to get to this deal agreement. Okay, I follow you, state, with your decision power. You impose on me with your power monopole, because at least I can pursue my modest life aims if I just earn my money and buy a bicycle or whatever from that. That is not something that exists in these states. This is not the basis for the identification of the citizens with the power monopole in these countries, with a monopole that imposes these living conditions on them. So they cannot say, well, that's all a shit, right? My whole life is about working, but at least I have my holidays in Mallorca. At least I can buy a used Mercedes, or maybe also brand new Mercedes if I, make a good deal somewhere and so on. This is not possible. This basis, this deal between the citizens and the nation state as the basis of identifying yourself with this political body, does not exist in these countries. This is what creates the trouble, the challenge, the problem. Post-colonial theorizing is about how to create a national identity under these circumstances. And secondly, obviously, the status of such a citizenship in the relation to other citizenships in the world is a bit not very, highly leveled, of course. So how to be acknowledged as a citizen of these countries, which according to what counts in this world, don't have anything to contribute. What counts in this world is money. But if you don't have the possibility to earn money, even in that modest way, you also have the second position that your nationality doesn't count in this world. These are the two challenges that constitutes post-colonial thinking. What is called, in their words, the indigenization, the creation of a national identity beyond the conceded materialism, and secondly, how to gain a status as a citizen in the world of citizens consisting of these kind of citizenships in the imperial world based on this conceded materialism which doesn't exist in these parts of the world. That is the basis of what post-colonial thinking is all about. And I will, in the next session, start discussing the reflections, some examples of the typical reflection of post-colonial thinking, and try to show how this is the trouble they are trying to deal with, without being aware about that this is what they are all dealing with. That's enough for today.
Okay, Michael, thanks for this introduction. There are still a couple of episodes coming to basically back up the arguments that you now made and improve them, actually, and looking at post-colonial thinkers and ideas and concepts in more detail. But for now, let this suffice as an introduction to the series in English. Thanks for having you with us again, Michael, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sorry for the introduction, but at least I reached the point that I wanted to reach today. That is already something you should give me a compliment for. Normally,
no, excellent.
Normally I talk much longer than I planned, but today I reached precisely the point. I don't know how I made it, but no, because you told me in between discreetly, hey, you have only 5 minutes.
Excellent.
No,
excellent.
No, okay.
No, very good. All right, and then thanks for everybody listening, and we will talk to you soon. We are out. See you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. See you soon. Next.
Eure Hilfe. Wenn euch dieses Video gefallen hat, klickt auf Like, abonniert den Kanal und vergesst nicht das Glöckchen zu drücken, damit ihr benachrichtigt werdet, wenn wir neuen Content droppen.
Außerdem solltet ihr uns überall folgen, wo wir verfügbar sind. Das ist Facebook, Instagram, Twitter und Twitch. Und wenn wir irgendwelche Ankündigungen machen oder Posts, dann shared, was das Zeug hält. Gebt uns all eure Liebe.
Wir haben mittlerweile ziemlich signifikante Kosten. Wenn ihr es euch irgendwie leisten könnt, unterstützt uns doch auf Patreon. Dann kommt ihr auch in den Genuss verschiedener Vorteile, wie zum Beispiel Zugang zu unserer Discord-Community oder Zugang zu den ultrageheimen Patreon-Episoden, die wir dort posten. Außerdem könnt ihr uns natürlich auch über PayPal Spenden zukommen lassen.
Außerdem haben wir mittlerweile einen eigenen Online-Shop. Das heißt, wenn ihr euch immer noch fragt, was ihr euren Lieben zu Weihnachten, Ostern oder sonst wie schenken könnt, geht dorthin und kauft duftes Merch.
Alle Links dazu hier in der Beschreibung oder auch auf unserer Webseite 99zu1.de.
Vielen Dank fürs Dabeisein, danke für die Unterstützung und wir sehen uns in diesem Theater.